Okay, good afternoon to all of you, or good morning, good night, wherever you may happen to be sitting, and a very warm welcome to the Climate-Friendly Climate Research Conference from us here in Vienna. Perhaps to everyone who has their video on at the moment, can you all hear me fairly well? Just a thumbs up will do if you can hear me. Fantastic, good stuff. Well, before we start talking about what motivated us in organising this conference and the work that surrounds it, we would like to ask you all what motivated you to join us here. I would ask you all to let us know where you come from and your motivation for participating in the conference or your connection to the theme of climate-friendly climate research. And what I would ask you to do is just to write your name and your motivation in the chat window, like I've done here. If you see that to the right of the screen, if you use that chat window, that would be great. And whilst you're all doing that, I'm going to take a moment to introduce Sebastian as the project initiator to briefly give us your thoughts and motivation on the subject in this project. And by means of a brief introduction, Sebastian studied environmental sciences in Germany and Switzerland before completing his PhD on socio-economic issues related to climate change. He works at the Center for Global Change and Sustainability here at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna. And the particular link to this project, Sebastian is a member of the governing board of the European Joint Programming Initiative Climate, which is an alliance of national research funders, including the Ministry for Science and Research here in Vienna, from 15 European countries who are interested in jointly funding research that supports society in tackling the grand societal challenges of climate change projects such as these. Sebastian, I would ask you for your remarks, please.
Thank you, Ed. And also, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, just a few words about the background of this organization, of this conference. In JPI Climate, which, as Adam said, is an alliance of European research funders, our research policy and also our investments are driven by the insights that if research wants to contribute to positive societal change, if research wants to contribute to climate-friendly, sustainable society, research will have to be a part of this change. And particularly since Al Gore's restless journey across the planet to convey his important message on global warming, do we know that the message that science communicates is also linked to the actions that we take. We have had to learn how ruthless so-called climate skeptics lobby organizations are investing millions of dollars and euros to discredit the evidence of environmental scientists and environmental researchers and climate scientists. And our own ecological and carbon footprint provides them an excellent opportunity to do so. But much more important, we can actually offer society positive role models, not negative ones. Scientists are making a strong statement if they communicate towards the public and decision makers that they are actually acting in line with the implications of their findings, and if they're acting towards reducing the constantly growing carbon footprint of the work and of the research system. Actually, the important features of our work, important features of organizing our work, including the importance of an international collaboration and exchange, lots of traveling, corresponds to the conditions under which many of our colleagues in the business and service sector work. But sadly, in this we will hear later on in the session, the same holds true for a constantly growing carbon footprint that is far beyond a sustainable carbon budget. So wouldn't it be important if those that should know best, and that's us, if we would start to find innovative ways of organizing our work, our collaboration in a climate-friendly, sustainable manner to inspire others to do the same. And this is what we in JPI Climate call climate-friendly climate research. And we have assigned a team of experts led by Adam to analyze the carbon footprint of our operations and provide us with feasible solutions to reduce it. And in fact, we consider this endeavor as a continuously organizational learning process, and we are well aware that we can't change our operations overnight, and I assume that this is true for many of us here today. But just like this virtual conference, we think it's a start, and we think it's an important one. And in order to succeed, in order to work towards ambitious, sound, and feasible options of a climate-friendly research system, we need both your real-world perspective and your visions of a better world. And of course, we need you to share your experiences and your ideas and insights about how to make the better world the new real world. And to do that, we are inviting you to actively contribute by joining our interactive discussions, by switching on your cameras, which many of you already did, and your headsets by responding to our flash polls, as well as by continuously discussing and commenting on the inputs that we will receive during the sessions and during our sessions through our interactive chat windows that many of you already used. And this is actually an excellent opportunity because you won't have to wait until the end of the presentation to share a brilliant idea. So, and this is also one of the merits of this virtual conference setting that we chose. And of course, our presenters will give their best to already include your ideas and your comments directly into the presentation to make this really a joint community discussion already during the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I know that many of us here are looking with kind of mixed feelings towards Poland, towards Warsaw, where the 19th Conference of Parties of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change has just started this morning. And these mixed feelings, they remind us that the overwhelming scientific evidence on climate change, its human drivers, its consequence, its impact, and the urgency to take comprehensive action, that this overwhelming added evidence is not being translated into national and international climate policies. And these mixed feelings remind us that it's the responsibility and also the opportunity of us all to find innovative ways of organizing our work, our collaboration in a sustainable, climate-friendly manner, and to inspire others to follow. And you know what? Our friends at the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change at the UNFCCC headquarters are doing exactly that. The organizational staff of the UNFCCC decided to set positive examples to the delegates of the world, especially those from Europe. It decided to board the train at the headquarters in Bonn, Germany, and to travel all together along the European Railway to the meeting venue in Poland. And thereby, they not only reduced their carbon footprint by roughly 80%, they used the travel time for working their ways through the last organization details that were expecting them in Poland. And I'm sure that our colleagues from UNFCCC on the way also had lots of fun. So now it's up to us all here in the virtual world, but also in our real worlds, to become part of this positive change and to show how the research system and the people constituting it, and that's us, how we can become role models of a climate-friendly society that cherishes joint creativity and international collaboration. And to stay on this positive note, I would like you to think about and also to post in our chat window some innovative, unconventionally, perhaps fun ways of reorganizing our work in a climate-friendly manner that inspired you and that also could inspire others to follow. Thank you very much.
Well, many thanks for your opening words, Sebastian. It's interesting. I've been reading through all of your comments in the chat here, and I think obviously along the interest which characterizes all of your mentions here, I think there's a lot of curiosity and a lot of sort of willingness to learn. And I think what I would see the particular merits of the conference taking place this week is that it's a room for learning and a room for experimenting. And I hope that we will go through this week, that we learn a lot of lessons along the way and can really take a lot from this conference. But before we do so, I'd like to just add a few words myself. And I think Sebastian gave us some of the good news and painted a positive picture. And it's now sort of my job, and I think that it's also necessary to refer to the challenges which motivated this conference. Now, the issue we're going to be dealing with this week is a very multifaceted one. It's a personal issue, it's a cultural issue, it's an institutional issue. It's a personal issue because in terms of preferences on, let's say, air travel, there's issues of comforts, there's issue of status involved. It's a cultural issue because related to conference issues, there's also visits, there are also issues of status. And it's institutional because in the age of tax breaks on kerosene and the related cheap airfares, and it's interesting, I just picked out an advert from the paper a couple of days ago. It's in German, but it's advertising 10,000 flights, Vienna, Rome, or similar for 98 euros return. So we have these sort of pressures on the one, and then pressures on research budgets and the urge to take the cheapest option on the other hand, which means that air travel, for the most part, trumps train travel or other more sustainable means of traveling. Alongside that, we currently also work in an academic system which not only rewards, but also expects high carbon activity, such as flying to conferences to present papers. In this context, a colleague from Switzerland, Barbara Bleich, from Zurich, has coined the very fitting term conference tourism. And whilst she accepts that a certain level of travel is necessary, indeed good, and has multiple co-benefits, you know, we all know the sort of the discussions at the conference dinner following the day at the conference, where we really get to know our colleagues, develop ideas, and so on. I think it's also it's a question of how many, how much of this we do. And she also questions whether, sort of in the academic world, attending meetings in Paris today, Helsinki tomorrow, and Boston on Wednesday, how she has put it, whether we're really making a positive contribution to teaching and research, quite apart from the environmental impact we're having when jetting around. Now, we're all aware of what's at stake. On the one hand, when we urge the world to reduce their carbon emissions, but continue to jet around ourselves, then firstly, that's inconsistent, and on the other hand, credibility suffers, which is a point so eloquently made by the chair of Session 4 tomorrow, Erica Thompson, from the London School of Economics. We're also aware that any carbon dioxide we emit today will spend roughly 100 years in the atmosphere, further warming the planet. And yet, despite that knowledge, the emissions related to climate science and policy are rising. We're going to hear plenty of examples of this later on in the next session, but I'd just like to throw one number into the room. It relates to the 15th Conference of Parties of the UNFCCC in 2009 in Copenhagen, and the emissions of that conference were over 70,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. And for the particular relevance to this conference, over 90% of those emissions came from air travel. Now, just to give you a couple of comparisons, that's the equivalent of the fuel-related emissions of driving a small car the distance from the Earth to the Moon and back again 700 times. It's also the equivalent to 10% of the annual emissions of Rwanda, a country of 9 million people. And I think just with those examples, we see sort of the significance of the carbon emissions of the research system and policy systems, but also the potential that lies there in reducing those emissions. And I think that's the reason why we're all here today. Now, the title of the conference suggests the climate impact of the research system as a whole. And whilst obviously many factors affect the emissions of an institutions, you know, buildings, resource use, and so on, factors which will also be introduced and addressed in session 3 tomorrow within CFCR, Climate Friendly Climate Research, an acronym you'll probably hear a few times in the next few days. We've made the explicit choice to focus on travel and meetings, and I think there are a few good reasons for that. On the one hand, Aviation emissions are responsible for a significant and growing proportion of research emissions. Above that, globally, aviation emissions already contribute to around 5% of global emissions, are also on the rise. Now, before I hand you over, I would just like to point out a couple of positive points as well. We don't need to look merely at the challenges. And I think on the positive side, there are many solutions on offer, and we'll see some of those in sessions on Tuesday and Wednesday. There are innovative ideas being circulated regarding conferences, such as limiting participation and at the same time granting fairer access to participants from the Global South, as Professor Ed Hall from Dundee has suggested. There are new models for collaboration, as Seth Baum from the Global Catastrophic Risk Institute will explain to us later on today. And there are research institutions which are actively reducing the carbon footprint of their activities, as Ruth Wood from the Tyndall Centre will show on Thursday. Beyond content-related issues, I'd also urge you to see this conference itself as a room for learning and experimenting. Now, I'd like to just take this opportunity to again welcome you to the conference. We're very much looking forward to this conference, to the many lessons that will be to learn, and to collaborating with many of you. And I would now ask Helga Kromp-Kolb for our opening remarks. Briefly, by means of an introduction, Helga is a climate scientist and heads the Institute of Meteorology at the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences. She was Austrian Scientist of the Year in 2005 and helped found the Center for Global Change and Sustainability in 2009, which she heads ever since. Helga, the virtual floor is yours.
Has to be activated.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you also for inviting me to make these few remarks, and hello to all of you out there. I'm very pleased that this first Friendly Climate Conference has become a reality. I'm proud of all my mainly young colleagues here and internationally that have the courage to experiment and to find new ways to meet old challenges. Looking at your faces, I seem to be by far the oldest here, so I'm very glad we have this pioneer spirit among the next generation. When I was young, traveling to conferences across Europe and lo and behold, every now and then even across the Atlantic, that was really something at the time. That was one of the cherished benefits of a scientific career. You really got to travel a lot. But as time went on and the number of conferences increased, well, I started to realize that I never got to know any of the countries or cities I went to. I just know lecture halls and hotels, and they were pretty much the same all over the world. And so these trips lost much of their attraction. And with the increasing security checks on airports and the longer time delays until you really got to your flight, flights became less attractive, and overnight trains really became the thing. There's nothing like boarding a train at night, having time to read documents, prepare speeches and presentations, think the whole conference through, and arrive refreshed right in the center of town with no hustle for luggage, etc. So for me, overnight travel by train has become the method to travel. But a few years ago, Sebastian started to systematically introduce telephone conferences in our project work here in Vienna. And I realized how much could be gained by them. And I don't mean the CO2 saved, although that is very important as well. I mean the time saved. Meetings even close to Vienna that would not have been able to participate due to time constraints suddenly became accessible. Instead of spending one full day for a meeting of 2 hours, often 1 hour was enough, because telephone conferences proved extremely efficient. Participants are much more precise and short on the phone than they are in the meeting room, and they only speak when they really want to contribute something. Most of this usual vanity parade is just out. That saves a lot of time. As technology evolves, and we see an example of this today, and I hope it will keep on this way throughout the week, things become more comfortable, and you can even see people you're talking to, not only hear them. So these virtual conferences, I think, will become an important aspect of our scientific life. They will never replace personal meetings completely. I don't think they should. It is absolutely necessary to also meet people personally and chat with them. but it will reduce the number of these direct encounters, and I think that is a good thing to save that time and also, of course, the CO2 emissions. We must reduce our greenhouse gas emissions dramatically, and these conferences are one major way of contributing in our profession. But there are a number of additional good reasons to do this besides the climate aspect. We save energy, and fossil energy essentially, and that is a resource that is becoming scarce. We also save time, as I already mentioned, and that is a scarce resource to most of us. The process is also family friendly because mothers, fathers, husbands and wives and friends have more time with their loved ones. We also avoid risks because planes do crash every now and then. And these conferences are also more comfortable. In the environment of your office, you have all the data, the background information, etc. at hand. In short, CFCCs, as I would like to call them, increase the quality of life. To me, this is a simile for a whole spectrum of actions needed to combat climate change. You will find that many climate-friendly actions are also a step towards higher quality of life. Changing from your car to a bike or public transport, eating local products and less meat, buying longer-lasting products are just a few examples. Changing these habits needs thinking and determination, and it might be uncomfortable at first, but with the courage to try, you often find that is well worth it, and you often wonder why you didn't take the leap earlier. We climate scientists have become accustomed to the fact that our warnings are not heeded, that in spite of reliable information, determined actions by our governments are still missing. The present COP in Warsaw will unfortunately most likely be another demonstration of this fact. One possible reason for that is, and I think we have to face this, that in line with our scientific results, we mainly produce warnings and pictures of hazards, the hazards we're heading for. And when newspapers ask us and media ask us, that is also what we focus on. But people tend to look away. It might be easier to set people in action with the promise of a better world, a world of higher quality of life, rather than just increased standard of living. That might not be the classical domain of us climate scientists, but in interdisciplinary teams, together with social scientists, psychologists, etc., we might be able to produce very useful pictures. And this also goes for what we need to do regarding these conferences. But before I finish with these considerations, one more aspect. More knowledge about our world, about climate, entails more responsibility, also for the dissemination of that knowledge to the public and decision makers. In this context, I find the verdicts against the geoscientists of the Aquila earthquake cause extremely interesting. They were not convicted for not predicting the earthquake, but essentially because they did not contradict the reassuring statements made to the public, and they did not make an effort to provide a careful evaluation of the potential hazards to the public. And that, I think, is also very interesting for us climate scientists. Now, as to the conference, how can we get this idea of these CFCCs into more wide fields of reference, into the heads and the minds of our colleagues? Well, I think the first step would be to win our climate science colleagues to refrain from excessive conference tourism. It should become a matter of prestige to organize and attend CFCCs. The second step is to praise the advantages of CFCCs vis-à-vis colleagues from other scientific fields and thus spread the virus. And finally, we can also carry our message to our business partners. In every case, emphasizing that they are doing it for themselves and their families. And the climate issue is a very, very important, but a side effect. I think if we address them as something where they can win quality of life, we are more likely to succeed than if we ask them to do something to protect the climate. So overall, once more, thanks to the pioneers. I will be joining the conference hopefully several times during the next few days, and possibly also demonstrated at an Austrian-wide climate meeting at the end of this week. I wish us all a successful and enjoyable meeting and many more to follow. May this be the beginning of a new era of scientific conferences. Thank you.
Yes, many thanks for your opening, inspiring words, Helga. And yeah, let us hope that this is the beginning of a new era in scientific, but also in policy making meetings. I think although the focus here is on science, this is actually, there's lessons to be learned here for all walks of life. Now, we're going to take a very brief moment before we go into session one. Before we do so, I'd just like to welcome other participants who have joined us during this opening session. As far as I can make out from the list of participants and also the various things being typed into the chat window, we have a 2/3 coverage in terms of the world's continents, which is nice. We have participants here from the US, from Europe, from Africa, and from Asia. And yeah, it's nice. Maybe we'll get all 6 continents covered during the week. Before we close this opening session, I'd just like to say another big thank you to everyone involved in this conference, the project team, and in particular, a very big thank you to David Rutler, who is the technical mastermind behind this conference and also waving at us here. And while we're on the sort of technical note, maybe also just to say once again, we're here to learn and experiment. That means this might not be completely smooth going all the way through. I think it's it's going to be interesting just to see which things go well, which things go less smoothly, and all throughout David will be available for any of your sort of technical queries. On the whole, I would just urge you all to use the chat window here if any questions or problems come up during the week. So thank you all for joining us for this opening session, and we're going to take about a minute or two just to get the presentation set up for session one. See you in just a moment.